Okay, I think we're ready to start the next one. Do we have people straggling in or? All right. Hold on, I'm gonna set my timer because I will always go over. There we go. All right. So I'm Joel Sahleen. I'm an engineering manager over internationalization at Spotify. I'm also a member of the Unicode community engagement team. And today I'm going to be talking about kind of a proposal project we have in the works called the Unicode Guide to Software Internationalization. I'm going to give a sense of the background, goals, what the progress we've made, and what our future plans for it are. Okay, so quickly contents. We're going to some background, purpose and goals, and the organization and content of this guide we're proposing. Then we'll do a quick website demo and then talk about the publishing process, future directions, and the current status. So I have a lot of slides, but they're very simple. So I'll try to get through them as quickly as I can. So let's start with project background, or what is the problem we're trying to solve with this project? So in general, the background is that the global growth of the internet and the kind of proliferation of internet connected devices has created more of a need for what we could call international software. And international software is just software that's been architected and written in a way that it kind of operates internationally and supports localization. The context that is surrounding the guide in particular is that this increased demand for this type of software has created an increased demand for software developers and also localizers who understand internationalization, or the process of making software that works internationally and can be localized. The problem we are facing, unfortunately, is that software internationalization is not generally taught in computer science programs. And most localization programs focus on language and program management as opposed to development. The consequence of that problem is that most new developers have never internationalized an application before. And while most new localizers understand what internationalization is and why it's important, they don't actually understand how it works. This has the impact that feature developers often end up having to reinvent the internationalization wheel for their particular part of the application, or make things up as they go along. And meanwhile, the localizers generally do not have the knowledge or experience necessary to help developers do this in a more scalable and standardized way. So why do we care about that? Because as the software matures and the scope of localization expands to more languages, internationalization becomes more difficult, more time consuming, and then it ends up getting deprioritized relative to other work that software development teams have. You accumulate a whole bunch of internationalization tech debt, which no one ever looks at, and ultimately that leads to a degraded experience for international users. So that's the problem. So what are we actually planning to do, and what do we want to achieve with this project? Well, our hypothesis is that the current deficit in internationalization knowledge and skills can be traced back to four main factors. The first is that there's generally a scarcity of qualified instructors to teach internationalization. Most of them are in this room right now. There's also an absence of well-defined curricula for how to teach internationalization. Perhaps the biggest lack is that we lack an effective set of learning and teaching materials for teaching internationalization. And more recently, there's been an increase in developers and localizers who come to the field from non-traditional backgrounds. They don't come from computer science programs. They don't come from localization programs. So even if we could get those skills into computer science and localization programs, not everybody is coming from those. So the opportunity we see is that most of these problems could be addressed by expert contributors working together to design, create, deploy, and maintain an online guide to internationalization. The Unicode Consortium, of course, is an ideal space for this work to take place. So what are our objectives for this guide? Well, the first objective is we want it to be authoritative. And that means that the guide should be reliable, up-to-date information about internationalization that is based on industry standards and best practices and written by experts. Our second objective is it should be fairly extensive. The guide should provide a comprehensive but high-level overview of internationalization that covers most of the important aspects while supporting multiple self-directed learning paths and linking out to more detailed resources. Objective 3 is that it needs to be accessible, not in the alley sense of the word, although it should be that as well. But it should be produced and written in a way that makes sense to individuals in a variety of software development roles and localization roles, and not just hardcore engineers and linguists. Product managers need to see it. Program managers need to know what this is. 4, it needs to be engaging. If we just write documentation, no one's going to read it. The guide should provide an engaging learning experience that is well structured and includes different types of content for different audiences and learning styles. And then the final objective is that it should be discoverable. The guide should be cross-referenced, searchable, and SEO friendly so that it's easy to navigate and you can find the information you need in little bits and chunks, both inside the site and through external search engines. So if we can achieve all those objectives, what are the actual outcomes we want to have come out of this project? Well, first, we want the guide to be used in computer science and software development programs to help students learn how to internationalize their applications. Second, we want the guide to be used in localization programs to help students learn how to work with software development teams. Third, we want it to serve as an online reference for practicing localizers and software developers, something they can turn to, something a program manager can, for example, point developers to if they need to know how to do a particular thing. The fourth outcome that was getting more into the long-term outcomes we want to see from this is that we want it to actually improve the practice of internationalization in the real world. And 5, by doing that, we want the guide to actually help make software more accessible to more people. So with that, that's kind of the background of the project. Let's talk about get into the actual organization and structure of the guide. So the inspiration for the guide is it's intended to be a modern take on the traditional academic edited volume. It employs the same publishing model with editors and contributors while leveraging the interactive capabilities of the web. The guide will start out with front matter that explains what the guide is about, why it was created, and who you should contact for further information. And then it will have a general introduction that summarizes the different parts of the guide and explains the purpose and function of each chapter that follows. The guide itself, the bulk of it, will be made up of thematic chapters that focus on different aspects of internationalization. And each chapter should start with an overview and end with a review. The chapters will be independently produced by different experts, but they should all fit together to form a curriculum. So the single guide could be used in a course, for example, a computer science web development course as a week-long series on internationalization. You're never going to get an internationalization course in a computer science department. And then most of all, inside each of these chapters, there will be nested folders and pages, and on each page, there'll be a variety of content for a variety of people. There'll be a brief summary and overview of the content, a clear statement of learning objectives for that particular page, a short video lecture or screencast between 5 and 10 minutes, supporting documentation and notes, working copyable code samples with highlighting, cross-references to other pages in the guide, links to outside resources, specifications, etc., and then actual demo components that show how to actually do it in a live example. Following these thematic chapters, we could add an open-ended set of useful appendices that focus on related topics that aren't directly internationalization, but are also part and parcel of what it means to be an internationalization engineer or a localizer. And those would be things like managing an internationalization program, designing international software from a product and a UXD perspective, or building out a localization infrastructure to support the internationalization work. Oh, of course, I'm getting a call right now. So with that, I will turn to this demo app I've built, which is very simple. You can find it if you want to go there now at unicode-guide.vercel.app. And it looks something, oh, it's not going to share that tab, is it? How do I do that? Share this tab instead. Got it. Got it. All right. And so what I've done here is I've just taken a theme, basically a documentation theme. It's written in MDX, which is Markdown with JSX components in it. I constructed a basic site structure. I brought in a React YouTube player, and I've dropped the Unicode, what is Unicode video in there for a placeholder. The guide is searchable, so on the client side, because everything is indexed at build time. It has here the about section, the front matter I talked about, which can be filled in with actual content about the project and its background. And then the introduction chapter kind of outlines the structure of what I personally feel would be a good curriculum for internationalization. And the idea is really that you could do the whole curriculum, but you could also take the pieces that you need and use them as you want. So as part of this curriculum, you can see here on the sidebar on the left is initially some conceptual stuff. People just explaining and defining terms and concepts about what is internationalization and its relationship to localization, because that's something a lot of regular developers don't always get. Then there would be a chapter on common internationalization concerns. This would be focusing more on what is internationalization all about in terms of subject matter. What do we actually care about? What do we deal with? Once we have kind of a sense of what the problems internationalization is supposed to solve, we can get into the Unicode internationalization tech stack, which will be the most formal kind of documentation heavy part of the guide. So we would go all the way out from Unicode, UCP, CLDR, ICU, API level, programming language level APIs, and then the frameworks that are built on top of those. The next one would be on internationalization system design, which is, even though we have all these components, for a particular application, you still need to bind them together into some kind of system that actually works in your application. And then while it would be nice if internationalization was brought in from the beginning of a project, most often it's something you're retrofitting back onto an existing application. So there could be a chapter on refactoring for internationalization. How do you do that safely with tests, things like that? Then the chapter on practical internationalization would focus more on the day-to-day internationalization work that feature developers have to do. How do they incorporate that into their sprint planning? At what stage in the development process should internationalization be taken on? There'd be a chapter on internationalization testing. I think we have some great experts in the room who could contribute to that. And then a chapter on the future of internationalization and new directions in which the field is heading. Then, of course, down at the bottom, we have those 3 appendices I mentioned for, which is open-ended, and we could add more on the end. On each page, you have, of course, a video for the video lecture. You have a summary tab, an objectives tab, notes and documentation tab, code samples tab, and finally, a resources and links tab. All of those can be filled in by the individual contributors to provide kind of the basic information and then use the links to go out to more specific information. Okay, with that, that's kind of the demo. Let me, oh, that's not the one I want. Oh, I lost it, didn't I? Thank you. I want to go. Where did it go? I closed it, didn't I got it. Thanks. Okay, sorry about that. All right, and we're back. Minimize that. There we go. So the technology that this initial sample guide is built on is using Next.js, and then it's using the Nextra static site development framework and a modified version of a theme that comes with it. It's currently hosted on Vercel, which offers free team accounts for not-for-profit organizations, but we could always just leave it there and connect it as a subdomain of unicode.org, or we can move it to a new hosting provider, whatever we need to do. It's pretty portable. Some of the features of this technology is that, of course, it's static page generation. It has build-time indexing and client-side search. It supports accessibility and localization out of the box. And the pages are written in Markdown with JSX components embedded in the Markdown. And the way the theme is set up, you get automatic page and document table of contents, which are completely configurable in terms of titles and organization. So a lot of people have tried to do something similar to this in the past. So how can we ensure that this actually works, and what are the next steps for making it work? Well, the first step is to set up an education working group that is made up of members of the community engagement team. And this working group will be responsible for defining the overall structure, style, and format of the guide. Kind of the editorial committee, if you will. Then we will invite contributors to produce each chapter based on their expertise. Each contributor will receive a publication credit, which is useful to some people. And chapters can also be co-produced by multiple people or in consultation with other experts. To ensure quality, each chapter will be reviewed by the education working group and external reviewers at multiple points in the production process. And contributors will also review each other's work for the sake of consistency across the guide. Keep the information in the guide up to date. New editions of the guide will be released each year. Most of the guide will consist of evergreen information that just needs to be updated, and we can use quarterly updates or biannual updates to fix any errors. But the important thing is, just like with CLDR or with ICU, you need to have like a release schedule, regular releases that come out, as opposed to just constantly updating it all the time in a more continuous fashion. And that's mostly for citation reasons. So what are some of the future directions that could be done with the guide? Well, the first one is localization. The Nextra framework supports localization of the actual content pages simply by creating a copy of that page and translating it. It's not the most scalable solution, but it works in this particular use case. If we combine this with translated subtitles from YouTube, where the videos are drawn, the guide could support global reach and may be made accessible to more people around the world. And this, I think, is a great opportunity for students in localization programs to contribute to the guide. Second, if the guide proves to be successful, the Unicode Consortium could essentially expand its online publishing to include specialized website monographs that dive deeper into particular subjects. For example, there could be a published site devoted entirely to script encoding. And then finally, the same process used to produce the guide could also be used to produce a Unicode journal at whatever frequency. The possibilities are endless. So what's the actual current status on this? Where do we stand? fairly detailed proposal for the guide was submitted to the community engagement team earlier this year. It's been reviewed and feedback has been incorporated and all signs are good. As you saw, an initial version of the actual site has been created in order to provide a clear picture of what the guide will ultimately look like and determine if it makes sense for us to manage this on our own or to use a third-party education provider. But given the experience building out the initial prototype and our limited needs, it seemed it's something we could easily manage on our own. The demo site outlines a proposed structure for the guide that can inform further discussions. I'm not saying that's what we should go with, but I have put a lot of thought into it, and I appreciate any feedback anyone may have on the structure of the guide. So kind of in summary, and that went way faster than I expected, the first thing we want is for this guide to be authoritative, produced by experts. We want it to be extensive, so it covers most aspects of I-18N, accessible, so it's useful to a diverse range of people and learning styles, engaging, so it's interactive and well-structured, discoverable with SEO and internal search, and all of this will be coming soonish in 2024. So how can you help? What are we looking for? Well, first of all, if you have topic ideas, you can suggest them at this new email address we created, i18nguide@unicode.org. If you have a specific chapter idea, if you have thoughts about the curricula that could be included in the guide, if you have thoughts for other guides or monographs, we'd love to hear it all. Second, you can join us for an on-conference session later today to discuss the guide contents and the publishing process. This could go south in a lot of ways. So we really want to nail down how this is going to work and make sure that the project is successful, because like I said, a lot of people have been trying to do this for quite a while and it needs to happen. You can help us with localization, which is again a great opportunity for students to get involved and learn about internationalization, why they actually translate the guide. And you can reach out to the education working group members with other questions or suggestions. And with that, I am done in a remarkably short amount of time, and so we can open it up to questions. Thank you. And just as expected.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I think Addison first, maybe.
Addison had his hand up first, I think.
Okay, sound
I can shout.
Okay, shout.
But we want you recorded too.
So they'll never know what I asked. Just see your face that way. I think one of the things that has been the idea of the annual
Mm-hmm.
release, as opposed to maybe structuring it like an MDN or something like that, which is more of a living thing. Waiting a year to see your writing on the web is like a long time.
That's true.
And it seems like one of the things that you might want to foster is a community, a sense of shared community space. So I'm wondering if you've been thinking about other models that have succeeded or failed in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, MDN is certainly something that I've looked at in the past. It's very documentation oriented. It's very oriented toward developers, right? So I would love for this to be for a more general audience. And because it's going to be used in more general audience, like I think of this about the students here, say they're writing a paper, they need to cite a thing on the guide, they can cite the XXX edition. That's the only reason for the kind of staggered releases. And because the people who are going to be running this guide, myself included, have day jobs. So it's not like we're going to be constantly pumping out new content. We want to put it in a kind of a cadence and a schedule, I think. Okay, yes.
So when this thinking from a tech perspective, how many hours of teaching and learning are you
Totally.
expecting for this? And I guess another question is, how are you thinking about adoption of this? So you talked about production of materials, but eventually this needs to be adopted in curricula and across universities. So is there a plan around that?
I think it's mostly a marketing campaign more than anything else, is what we need to, and then it's going to depend on the quality of the guide. And one of the reasons I want to make sure it's discoverable, and so that if someone goes into Google and types in, how do I do localized number formatting? This is one of the first suggestions that comes up, right? And so I think there's basically how the adoption happens. I've played with other models of like maybe you license it internally to a company for education for their own developers, but we've had a lot of discussion about it, and we really feel like the best thing is to keep it free, accessible, open, so anyone in the world can use it. Yes.
Oh, my turn. Thank you. I think what you just shared with us would be an extremely helpful resources for students. And I'm just wondering, is it even possible for those resources to directly collaborate with some schools, for example, like Middlebury Institute, just put them into, I don't know, our curriculum? That would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that's what we would want to do, I think, and there's licensing, copyright questions, all that need to be worked out. But we'd want this to be used in courses.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Or maybe my next question would be, is it possible for us to invite you to come back to Middlebury Institute?
Only if they pay me the spot.
Oh, okay, I will maybe tell them. Thank you.
Hi. I think this is a really good idea. You mentioned to reach global audience. Do you have alternative on the video because you're using YouTube there? Is there any alternative for country and region that have no access to YouTube or they have no bandwidth to low rich media?
That's true, but I think we let YouTube solve that problem for us. I don't, getting video to everyone in the world is maybe not a problem we should solve. And the reason we're going to go with YouTube is because there's already a Unicode channel, and we will put the videos up in a particular channel and then just draw them into the site. So you'll also be able to go to YouTube and find all these videos as well. But there'll be more in an organized curriculum as part of the site. So I hope that answers your question. Yes.
I have two questions. I hope that's okay.
No way.
The first one, not to minimize what you've presented here, but it seems to me that identifying a publishing platform and developing criteria for the structure and all of this and so forth is the easy part of the job.
Yes.
The
Very
hard
much
part
agree.
of the job is the actual writing of the content.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you all have started that or identified authors or any of that, or whether that's all still in the future.
Most of that is still in the future. One of the reasons I wanted to present this now at this conference, even though it's in kind of a nascent stage, is because then I can reach out to people here and say, hey, Addison, hey, Tex, this would be really great if you wrote that. We've tried to pare it down into little bite-sized chunks so that nobody has to write a novel. They just have to write little papers, And that's another reason for this kind of like extended publishing model, at least for the first edition or whatever, is so that we have time to collect that content.
Sure. The other question was, when you get into designing the look and feel of a website to carry all of this, it strikes me that it would be nice if at some point everything Unicode publishes, especially the standard itself, had a similar look and feel, and that we don't go off in 5 different directions here.
I would agree, but I would say that is a question for Coral. I'm not going to make that call.
I'm going to weigh in on a few things.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. And my question is, as you mentioned on the slide, I see a lot of opportunities for students, especially from like students at MIS.
Mhm.
And pretty sure everyone will really like welcome to join your project. And can you tell us like specifically like how we can like, for example, like how we should contact your team and like how we can create a localization team for your localization project? Can you?
That's something I plan on reaching out to Adam about, actually. And then we have the new email alias that you can use to get in contact with the team directly. But that would be something that would have to be worked out with us. So kind of TBD.
Hi, Joel. Thank you so much. I'm smiling, but I'm actually inside like crying out of joy and gratitude. I think I'm the only person in this room who is from a retail company that has been around for a long time doing international business, but still the inside work is, okay, it's being recorded. So like, I feel like if I can get my company to adopt a chapter, I'd love to adopt the
Certainly.
refactoring chapter. And I have a suggestion. So it's great that we can get it localized and everything, but the ones who have some interest and passion in this topic is all in this room.
Mhm.
But the target audience, I think we should
Define very well.
yeah, target audience we should reach out the most urgently is the product managers
Yep.
who only speak English.
Yep.
There are a lot of them in my company.
Yep.
So my suggestion is adding a chapter about product management.
So I kind of had that on that idea in the designing international software chapter appendix, because I was thinking that a lot of time when people talk about international software, they separate the UXD from the product management. And it would be interesting, I think, to have those in a combined chapter because those kind of go hand in hand. In my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be extensive or anything. I just thought that if we have that chapter, then I can literally get all the product manager at my company to like direct them to this resource, and
Yeah.
they will direct their engineers to the other chapters.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Over that way.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing this initiative and proposal as like someone who will be in the localization industry working in localization soon. I think this will be extremely helpful. I'm just wondering, like, are you planning to develop this maybe into a certification?
Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I would think more that would be something that MIS could develop, and
Yeah.
then it would be using this as materials.
Got it. Got it. So besides like localization, do you see any other opportunities for like students like from MIS can contribute to this project?
I mean, there's all sorts of labor-intensive work that would need to go into this, so I don't think we'd reject anybody.
Got it. So is there any way we can like kind of like follow like any news?
That's a good idea. Yeah, I'll figure out something like a blog or news update or something like that.
Got it. Thank you so much.
We have another comment over here, but I just want to suggest that you named a few of the experts in the room. Many of us would be happy to work with students to have them write. We give them the information, have them write it up, make some passes over it, and develop it that way. So I wouldn't exclude students.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
But
That's a great idea.
there are other ways to involve students and get the material created.
Yep.
Thanks, Joel. This is so fascinating. So my question is, do you think that the chapters are kind of set up in a way that could lend themselves to exercises? I feel like that's what really brings students in. And if so, I think that would be a great component of this.
I think there's a line we have to walk between it being primarily for students and being more that kind of reference work that is available for everyone. And I think I know personally, if I go to like, one of these Coursera sites or something like that, and it's like, this is going to take 80 hours, then I usually walk away. But I think, for courses where it's being used, they could run through the whole thing. But for individual developers who are facing problems on a day-to-day basis, the idea is more that you have your product managers or your program managers, whoever can point them to this resource, and then they can use that resource, as opposed to doing it in many different organizations over and over and over again, which is what's happening now, which is a great point that Addison made as well.
And sometimes not doing it well.
And not doing it well, yes.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. I'm also a student from MIS, and I think many of us here are language learners or just translation learners. So I appreciate that you said you're willing to cultivate our students, but I want to know, what do you expect us to be able to do, to be able to know very well about all the computer languages, about we are taking GameLog or Weblog, these kind of courses, but many of us don't know how to even internationalize a if-else sentences. That's kind of very hard to us, but we are kind of keep working on it. So what do you expect us to do?
So my initial thought was the localization would be the biggest part of it. But I would say a lot of that is TBD, and we kind of work it out, see what works, see what doesn't. This is going to have to be pretty iterative, I think, in terms of the model.
The students have a variety of interests, and my thought is you follow the passion. And some of the students are interested in internationalization.
Yeah.
They may not be programmers, but we can provide some conceptual overview and maybe even some detail, which the students can write up, and we can cultivate until it becomes exact enough. And that will be good material for other individuals who have the same background, and will appreciate that. And then we can have some programmers do more detailed work. So wherever the passion is and how we can support it, and if we get the material written and it's a good contribution, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, no.
Addison.
And then I think.
Maybe quickly, the maybe one concern I would have going in would be success metrics and understanding audience. I am hour-long classes and things that we can mandate people to do is one thing, but my challenge when I was an internationalization professional in a company was not teaching the IT&N team. It was teaching the 30,000 other developers.
Yep.
And how can I get them to sit still for the message? How can I get them to engage? How can I build the awareness to go look at something? And that's maybe a different modularity than like my big dumb IETN intro course used to be. And so I adopted different strategies there. And so I'm super interested in how can we ensure that we're measuring the correct audience for success and building the product that meets their needs.
Yep, those are good points. In terms of success metrics, I did list out some outcomes. That was a good point from Toril, so I appreciated that. I think we can instrument it all and track the audience, right? But I don't know that there's any way to do user research or something like that and figure out for a guide like this, but maybe there is. It's something we could talk about.
Briefly, have you thought about engaging with UNESCO, the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, and other organizations like the Endangered Languages Project? They're all interested in language, but they're very light on technology.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I know. Carla wanted the last
Yeah.
word.
Mind if I just come up to the
Yeah, please.
So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Joel for putting this presentation together, but more importantly, for bringing the challenge and the opportunity and a way to solve. Because I do think this is a huge need, and I'm passionate about this in part because in a prior role, I had responsibility for developing a Next Gen Leaders program. And it was building a curriculum. It was about, again, unpacking that black box that I mentioned yesterday morning and thinking about that next generation who's going to bring this work forward and be stewards and ambassadors for this work. And how do you do that? And this is it. And I love the questions that all of you are asking because they're big questions.
Yep.
And I'm hoping for big things. And I haven't put that out.
Uh-oh.
And I haven't put that out because I think we need to see some near-term wins
Yes.
and then see how we iterate,
Yep.
to your point. But I do want to go back to a few things. Sarmad, you mentioned, how are you going to get the word out? And Joel talked about marketing, but I also see an opportunity for partnerships
Mhm.
with different universities or different organizations to support that work. The low bandwidth issue, that's absolutely a real issue. And so we have to think about, if we're talking about global reach, how are we going to make that accessible? We aren't going to solve that in 2024, maybe not 2025, but others have solved it. So where can we learn from that and apply it for this as well? Let's see. The user interface. So I'm looking at this thank you slide, and I can't tell you how happy I am because we actually have a template that we were using for Unicode presentations, and I see a lot of the session hosts using that template. We didn't have a template for any of our prior activities. So this is the first kind of unleashing of that. And so that is part of what we're thinking about is how does Unicode, because the brand, is a reflection of the value that we deliver. And so we've been talking about that, and Marcus will remember the discussion because we used to have a technical site that was all red with the red logo. And we used to have the public facing site that had the blue logo. That was a production to get that change. And it was a change. So, that's happening over time. And of course, we would have been to make this an extension of the Unicode brand. And then Tex, I loved what you said about collaborating with the students, because that is part of that knowledge transfer that has to take place over time. And so having that mentor-mentee engagement to equip and empower that next generation is going to be critical to this work. And that starts at the very beginning. So all of that said, I'm really excited about this one. I'm excited about all of it, but this is a critical one, and it fills a need that somebody needs to step in and fill. The last thing I will add is that Unicode has 2 employees.
Yeah.
Okay, myself and Rick McGowan, and that is it. And everybody else who you see talking and asking questions like these are all stewards and ambassadors for Unicode, and I am privileged and humbled to work alongside everybody. But this is the work over 35 years in a very small organization with a huge impact. And so, we have to start small to iterate and get to a better place, but it's only going to happen because we're working together. So that's all. Thank you.
We're done? Okay. Cool. Thanks, guys.